Over the course of our lives, we all have negative experiences that have the ability to shape us and alter our perspectives in the future moving forward. And some people never heal from these. So, what exactly does it mean when we say time heals all wounds? On this episode of the Infusion Breakdown Show, the Breakdown crew sat down amongst ourselves to discuss this topic. Let's see what we came up with.
Before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to introduce to you our Black-owned business of the week, where we showcase quality Black-owned businesses for you to support every week. This week's business is Corporate Cutz based out of Norfolk and Chesapeake, Virginia, where you can get an elite grooming experience for great rates. If you're new to the area or if you just need a new barber, be sure to book your appointment right now with Emmett on their website. Also, check out episode 53 where Emmett was a guest on our podcast.
The question for today is going to be, does time heal all wounds? What do you guys think? Comment below. Let us know, okay? Does time heal all wounds? I think that's pretty similar to the phrase, time changes everything, like that saying, I feel. But me personally, I don't think time does anything. I think time is subjective. I think time is just what we make it, to be honest with you. Doing things changes things, and doing things can help you heal, but not doing anything will leave things just the way they are. People just say that so they don't have to immediately deal with their pain or ignorance, I feel. And I say people just say that so they don't have to immediately deal with their pain because people endure trauma, whether it's physically or mentally, and they don't want to actually deal with that trauma. They usually say something like time will heal all wounds after a traumatic event happens, or or something like that. And they usually don't want to deal with that trauma, or take the necessary steps or see a therapist, whatever it means to help themselves. And I say that people usually say that so they don't have to immediately deal with their ignorance, because people in a position of power say that to the oppressed to keep them calm and hopeful, so they don't have to face their ignorance, which is racism and oppression, because that means giving up a certain amount of power they're too comfortable with and too committed to. And prejudice is just an emotional commitment to ignorance, I feel. And I say that to say there's companies acknowledging Black Lives Matter, and that might be some progress. Like, yeah, that might be some progress, but that's just them acknowledging something is wrong with the car. But that doesn't mean they'll necessarily fix what needs to be fixed. Like, I saw a good car analogy on Instagram where, okay, your car engine is messed up and you take it to the shop and you tell them what needs to be fixed. You leave, you come back a few days later, and when you come back, you got a new paint job, you got new tints on your windows, you got spinning rims and everything like that. And you're like, oh my goodness, like, thank you. You did all of this and you fixed my car engine? Like, no, we didn't fix the car engine. Like, wait, what? So you fixed everything, but you didn't actually address the actual problem? So, like, so what is that for? And then the guy's like, yeah, but all parts matter. Like, wait, what? What the fuck are you talking about? But so I believe that companies are on the time heals all mentality if they don't actually address the problem. Like Call of Duty had a Black Lives Matter message when everything happened. But what are they going to do about like the actual racist accounts? Like I seen accounts where one guy's name was the Blacks, and he was of course racist as fuck. And I saw of course one account where it was like, I hate Black people, plain as day. Like what are you going to do about these actual accounts? And like a lot of other companies, Vogue released a statement saying they were down for Black people and everything like that, but they've been known to have shady racial practices as well. So when I was like texting Desmond and talking to Desmond about this being a trend, it was more so for the companies because they never actually deal with this before. So that's why I mentioned to Desmond, like, will the perception actually change within those companies? Like, perception might not matter on a micro level between peers, but there's three major areas Black people have to be like very cautious of when it comes to perception, and that is corporations, justice system, and the media, because it can definitely affect Black people in a negative way, and it can affect a Black person's whole life, essentially. So that's why I say that. Or it's really the alternative, which is companies are treating it like a trend and not making any real significant change. And if so, they're really going off of the time heals all mentality, I feel, and not actually doing anything. And like I said before, doing things changes things.
Yeah, you were definitely very different from the direction that
I know.
that I was looking to take the discussion. I mean, I do think you raised very valid points, and I hadn't considered that being the avenue that a lot of these companies are going with when they deal with what's going on at the moment, or what's been going on for as long as we can recall.
What you think? Time heals all.
Do I think time heals all?
Yeah.
I think so. I can't. So before I actually give you a definitive yes or no answer, so time definitely has transformative and healing properties, but much like what you said, it depends on, it's contingent on what transpires during that time. Is there active work being done to address something? Because otherwise, you can heal. For example, if you break a bone can heal but not be realigned, and the problem is still there. The arm is not in working function. But so with regard to time, any 2 points in time differ in the same way points in time from physical distance do. So this goes all the way from an individual level to the macro level. So you look at family, community, country, all that. So no 2 points in time are ever the same. Who we are today and who we are 10 years from today or 10 years ago, they're all different people. And so the analogy I like to use is the ship of Theseus is a Greek myth. And so the question that's, well, I'll explain it first. So the myth of Theseus is there's a ship that takes sail. And so over the course of the ship sailing, there's parts that are replaced. So they replace the floorboards, they replace the mast, the flags and all that. And then over the course of that, they pass some islands. The people that are working on the ship, they get off on the islands. And then new people come and take it. So by the time the ship comes back to port, it's an entirely new crew. And then there's all entirely new ship because none of the wood that was originally used to build the ship is still in place. And then so at what point is that a completely different ship? Is that the same ship at all? That's the question. And so time passing allows a new perspective because through us moving through life, we're replacing parts of ourselves. We're not exactly the same person we once were. So um, I think most people are willing to agree that as we traverse through life, we trade our challenges and problems for more difficult ones because as we're younger, our problems are, I guess, minuscule. If we look back in hindsight, we'll say, oh, well, back then when I was a kid, everything was easy. And then as we're an adult, things are more severe. So we go from things like report cards and parent pleasing to a sense of urgency to start a family or being confronted with the death of a loved one. So these experiences have the ability to shape us and mold us. And so as we move through life and then we look back in retrospect, after experiencing events like great loss, like a death of a grandparent, for example, things like nasty comments a kid made to you on the playground don't look so big or they don't have the same amount of impact. So I think that's part of the transformative properties of time because we have other points of reference as we've grown older that are more difficult, and it's a testament to saying, okay, well, I've been through, I've experienced death, I've seen someone I love die, and then you could look back and say, well, the stuff that I used to worry about, it really doesn't matter anymore. There's nothing more. There's nothing more that allows you to confront that fact than experiencing great loss. And I think that illustrates it perfectly, like the transformative properties of time. But I do think to your original question, so you don't say so you didn't answer the question. So my actual answer is I do think time does have the ability to heal, but it depends on how you use it.
So basically, what you make it, basically how you make it.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. But you kind of threw me for a loop when you said time is subjective, because I never thought of it. I see what you're saying, but I feel like time is a judge. You can't really reason with time. You can't bargain with time. It's a universal constant. We all experience it the same. If you abstract the fact we have time zones and stuff out, but we all
So we don't experience the same.
no, we do. We're all confronted with it.
Okay. Okay. Not at okay. I thought you meant like the same time. At the,
No, no,
okay.
no.
Okay, I got you.
It's like a universal law, like gravity.
Okay. What you think, Des?
I actually agree with Bryan word for word. Um, I kind of broke everything down as far as like the question, does time heal all wounds? And first and foremost, I wanted to look at what it actually means to heal. And then more or less in this particular question, it's to alleviate a person's distress or anguish. So as Bryan said, at face value, and as both of you said, it's really what you make it. What are you putting in as time progresses to get you to not necessarily a end goal, but what are you getting yourself to the point where you're emotionally and spiritually able to assess what has happened to you, take the positives from it, understand the negatives, but no longer let it affect you on a level to where it throws you off your game. So I kind of based off that analysis of it, I kind of broke it down into three questions, or not three questions, but three factors. Those three factors to me, just off the top of my head, is that the person has to be willing to grow and mature with time. That essentially means is that like you're not putting yourself into the same similar similar environments or settings that could have potentially triggered that harmful event to you. And before I go any further, I just want to say that based off of Bryan's example of it and then your example of it, it kind of brings into perspective or full circle how there's so many moving factors with this question itself. Like you can look at this on a macro level, or you can look at it on a micro level, and you can really like we just did. You could take what you want from it and arrive at different conclusions. But at the end of the day, like there's certain factors that you cannot necessarily change, like the death of a family member. But it could be some things where it's like a personal decision or a relationship decision that you've made, and you could have potentially made a better decision during that time, but you didn't have the maturity and the presence of mind to make the proper decision right there. So that's when that time can potentially heal the wounds with understanding what you did wrong and choosing to grow and mature. Second, the person has to be willing to let what was done be done, which essentially means to stop reliving it and looking at what you could have potentially done better, because essentially you're going to overthink. And hindsight, and this is what essentially helped me with my depression, was understanding that hindsight is always 20/20. With my theoretical mind, I can look at anything I've done in the past and say, okay, yeah, I could have said this or I could have done that. Anybody can look at it like that. But it doesn't make the situation any better, because you're living off of reality of what is instead of what is. And then third, the person has to be willing to accept the grief that comes with whatever has happened and learn to analyze what factors cause that grief. Now, of course, you can't take this and apply it to death, but you can definitely take this and apply it to any, personal development of any sort. And I think the most important factor of time healing the wound is this particular factor right here, is to be willing to accept the grief, because a lot of people, they'll deal with antidepressants of any sort. You can be, pushing things aside, playing video games. You can try and drink yourself to the point where you don't feel anything. You smoke to where, you don't necessarily have the, you don't have the presence of mind to deal with whatever is bothering you at that particular moment. But at some point, it always comes back, and it's something that you have to be able to address and not run from it. Because if you're constantly running from it, then you're just running with time. You're not necessarily making the most of that time. So agreeing with Bryan, I think, yes, time can heal all wounds, but I would say this is more subjective than the actual, actually saying it like that, it kind of makes me think that if you're saying time is subjective, then time can potentially heal all wounds. But because, mainstream media and culture in itself has made it more or less like a Band-Aid instead of the actual medicine, you kind of look at it that way, huh?
Yeah, basically.
Why did you choose to look at it from that perspective, Josh? Or why is your perspective on this particular question oriented around the handling of incidents like that?
The incidents like what exactly?
What you were saying about how companies choose to handle historical events.
Oh, why did I take it right there?
Mm-hmm.
That's just what I think about what I really think about when I hear the time heal all wounds is people waiting back and just letting things be how it was supposed to be, like the other episode we had, like things will be like will be. And I just thought about companies, and I just thought about the conversation I had with Desmond about trends and everything like that. And I was just thinking about these companies, and I was like, are they serious about this? Because this might be a new thing, and them having these messages out and playing to people like, yeah, we're with you, but there's a lot of like a lot of shady shit that goes on in companies every day. Like a lot of Black people just looked down upon in certain companies, and will that be addressed? Like I understand you trying to make sure we got blocks called Black Lives Matters and avenues, everything like that. Like, that's cool. Like, yeah, that's cool. But are you going to actually fix the problem? Like, are you going to do something about the law enforcement? Are you going to arrest Breonna Taylor's killers? Like, what are you going to do? Like, it just seems like you're just decorating the outer layer and be like, yeah, we're with you. Kumbaya, time will heal all. But are you actually going to do something about it? But I don't really think so, because people, that means white people have to give up a certain amount of power, or a certain amount of superiority, and they're not comfortable with that, I feel. And what really had me thinking about that even more is I watched a video about Jane Elliott. I don't know if you know anything about Jane Elliott, but she
Yeah.
administered the blue eye, brown eye test. And I seen it before this weekend, but I never knew like what her name was and everything like that. And I was just like, oh, this is genius. I need this in like police academies. I need this so they can, because that's the next step. They need to feel how it is to be Black. They need to undergo that Black experience at some way and see if they can handle it. And like, if you know anything about that video, like those people who was part of those blue eyes group, they couldn't handle it. It was like, no, like, and
Yeah.
it was only for a few hours. And then when they did it for the college, for a college course, like, you was getting a credit just to be there for 2 hours, just to endure that. But Black people do this on a daily basis, and you can't even do this for 2 hours. Like, that just shows like the amount of, like, you start learning like, oh wow, they really don't want to give up that power, because they feel like, oh, what if I'm treated like a Black person? Like, because if you're in a room with a majority white people and some Black people, and you ask them, all right guys, stand up if you guys want to be treated like a Black person. Nobody's going to stand up. Nobody's going to stand up, because they're like,
Because
oh,
they know.
yeah, I don't want to be treated like a Black person. No, I like the style of what Black people bring, but I don't want to be treated like a Black person. You know what I mean? So that's what I really started thinking about, and time heals all wounds and shit like that. So, but that's not why I originally came up with the question.
Yeah, that video, just on the topic of that, when you sent it over, I immediately recognized it because I had seen it before, and it's a really eye-opening video in terms of just seeing, like what you were saying, like people couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
They had people breaking down and leaving the room, and
Yeah, it's hilarious when this white girl started crying. You just being mean. She spoke out. You didn't do it. She spoke out. You didn't do it. Like, oh my God. Yeah. You think? Yeah, it's you learn a lot. I say that. And then I just started thinking, like, it's not that they don't think racism doesn't exist. They're like, I mean, it can happen to me. It happens to me, but now on the same scale, because that's really what they was really talking about. They was just talking about, oh, I mean, I might face as much racism as a Black person does. And she was just talking about her. It was just ridiculous examples, like, oh, my husband has to adapt. He has to wear a tie at work, and he doesn't like doing that. Like, that's not the same thing. Like, what are you talking about? So it's just wild what you learn from just watching that video.
yeah, thanks for sending that over again. It was a nice refresher.
No problem.
And so, Des, when you were saying we're going to refer to it for the sake of this question, the Trinity of Des for today. When you had the most important one, you referred to it as the willingness to accept grief, right? That was the most important one out of the three.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, what would you say is the biggest step into doing that? Because acceptance is something that a lot of people struggle with, especially like in the most severe example where we just talked about death, but even with smaller examples to where actions that they could have done to make situations different.
I don't think it's really like a uberly complex like step. I think it's simply letting whatever you're feeling settle, analyze every emotion and take it for what it is. That's the easiest way I can put it. Like, I think I don't know if I spoke on this last time, but I had an example to where, 2 weeks ago or last week, there were days where I woke up and I just didn't want to get out of bed. And instead of me trying to, fight through it and get up and, drag through an 8-hour day at work, like, I just stayed there and I let every emotion that I have run through my mind, address it right then and there, and then say, all right, what can I do to change it? What can I do to make myself feel better? Because, I mean, if you're on this hamster wheel of running from, whatever, is bothering you, that consumes 24 hours, or if you sleep for 8, it consumes 16 hours of your day. Whereas if you kind of just let it settle in, take the 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, or whatever, and just let it marinate. Be conscious of your mind. Be conscious of the thoughts as they come in. Address them. figure out if it's something that you can come up with a conclusion or something formidable right then and there. If not, push it to the back and everything will click as you are checking off other boxes of thoughts that are coming to your mind. And that's what I did. Like I laid there, I addressed everything. I was like, okay, you know what? I understand that I'm feeling this way. It's valid that I feel this way, but I also feel at the same time that there's a bit of an over exaggeration because I'm over consuming a lot of, social media data. Because I think anybody that, consumes a lot of social media data, people look and they look at, and like I said this last time, they look at the glamour of what is instead of what had to happen to get to, a certain point. And I always feel like, at 20, 25, almost 26, I could be doing more. So instead of consuming negative data and thinking like, man, I could be doing this, I could be doing that, I look at, okay, well, I've actually done a lot in my 25 years. I'm, striving to do something right now. I can't rush the results. I have to take every day at a time. And that's the first thing. Then after that, I get up, take a shower, brush my teeth, clean up, cook something to eat, and then I'm ready for the next day. And that's not to say that it's just going to be one day like that. Like you can, make it out of the bed, but that's as far as you can make it. That's still progress at the end of the day. Like there's still that brief moment of, growth or maturity to where you're like, all right, I can get out of bed. I'm willing to make the first step or take the first step to conquer whatever it is that's bothering me at this moment or whatever is negatively dragging me down. I'm willing to take the first step. And I mean, getting rid of that idle time is always going to be the first step. And then what you do after that, that's up to you.
I know we mentioned as far as why people don't think that way, why people don't do that. Well, I guess we can go back over it a little bit. Why don't people do that way? Right?
Because it's hard. As simple as that. Like I'm not going to make mental health or anything like that any more complex than it already is, because it's actually like it's fairly simple as far as like the remedies for it. But the actual like diagnosing aspect, there's a lot of complex factors behind it, because you could have so many things wrong with you that you're just trying to bottle up into one specific diagnosis that actually might need multiple diagnosis. So I think
but for that to ever be effective, wouldn't we need to change the whole system? Because it seems like the system is really just
what system
causing a strain, like the United States. I'm talking about as far as the system as the work system, how everyday life in society, no matter what it is, whether it's jobs, social interactions, whatever, puts such a strain on us. And I feel is that should we fix that first, and then that will be more people will be more willing to. It wouldn't be so hard to heal themselves. You know what I mean?
So you're saying to reprioritize well-being as a whole?
Yes.
Not as a very well. It's not vague, but I guess that's a more targeted problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Replace it with what though? There's nothing.
Either that. We just haven't thought of it. It's something to replace it. We just haven't thought of it.
I think the answer lies in micro changes.
Because you said it's hard, right? I mean, either you can accept that it's hard and be like, okay, only the people that are strong enough to do it will do it, or you can accept like maybe we should fix another underlying problem that's making it so hard for that to happen. You know what I mean?
I think when you get into underlying factors, or you're unraveling society as a whole, like everything is embedded together. To remove one thing and not replace it with something that can stand the test of time is essentially going to, result in the removal of that replacement with what was once there, or you're just going to see a collapse of the system in its entirety. So I kind of mentioned it. I think I had this far off thought, but I said, what if this was the communist revolution that Marx was thinking about, to where the capitalist system implodes instead of a capitalist regime or a communist regime coming in and like taking over and implementing their own. Like, what if that was the thing? Because I mean, I'm not going to sit here and ignore what you're saying, because there's a lot of truth behind it. But I think at the same time, like I mean, I hate to just be blunt, but it's life at the same time. Like everybody goes through shit. I think people just try and personalize their experience instead of realizing that everybody goes through shit. And when I say like personalized, I mean like dressing it up, giving it 5 stars. Like, yeah, I'm suffering. I'm going through this. Like, yes, we know you're going through things, but there's checks and balances in place to where you can you can do what needs to be done to grow from it. That's the easiest way I can put it. Like there's things in place that you can go through. And I understand that, like, there are some very, very unique situations. Like I don't ever want to, overshadow like rape and, any misogynistic behaviors that women encounter or anything of that nature, because I can't, as a man, I can't sit here and say, you can get over that. I don't know how it feels. I'm gonna just be blunt. I don't know how it feels. So for me to tell you that, you need to get over that, but pitching your idea of changing the system, how could changing the system prevent things of that nature? Like we've seen how, even when it comes to murder, you have the what is it called?
Aspect though.
Say it again.
Part of that is a power aspect though. As far as you talking about rape, that's just men power. That's what that is. And is that not part of the system?
Yeah, I was about to say, is murder not a power thing as well?
Yeah, I'll say that.
So what I'm saying is, like, if you have capital punishment as like the top level of punishment, and that still does not deter crime, then giving people the death penalty for rape isn't going to deter them from raping people. Like that's a mental thing at the end of the day.
Do people get the death penalty for it?
I'm saying if you
think
were
that
like
is
to make a
crime you
change
can.
like that, well, I don't know about that.
I think it's one.
For that, I feel like it's something that has probably never been implemented. I mean, maybe it's been implemented by, civil justice to where someone's taking, the law
If it's a
into
black
their own
person
hands.
going against a white person,
something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. But like the system itself, the structure as we know it, like I don't know, man. Like I want to be optimistic and say like changes from within will promote positivity and things like that. But the system that essentially causes the world to go around, man. Like it's a hard system to change because a lot of it comes from, exploiting ignorance and taking advantage of ignorance. Like that's a society we live in.
Yeah, but so I mentioned the system because it is a power aspect, and you mentioned it's a socio-economic issue as far as the race relations. But if there were more black people in a position of power, how do you know just because they're in a position of power, they would give back to the less fortunate black people? What if they just become just like those other white men in a position of power where they're like, okay, we still need underprivileged people, and maybe, okay, you guys have to be the underprivileged people. I did mine. I worked to get out of the hood. Maybe you guys should just do the same. Like, I know you heard black people who would say something like that. So maybe we should do something about the system instead of, you know what I mean?
I get that. You do bring up a good point about that because the answer is more complex than just putting black mascots at the head of organizations or government entities and thinking that the problem is going to be fixed. But when it comes down to restructuring any kind of complex system, so the example I look at, I'm going to go with science. So if you look at the food chain, food web, look at the cane toad was an invasive species to Australia that was originally imported to control the cane beetle. And so it just wreaked havoc because it had no natural predators. And so just by thinking that they could engineer that complex system, the food web, by the addition of one small thing, we have a much more likely chance of sabotaging the entire thing than fixing it. So when you make changes like that, I'm not advocating against it. You're on something. You're a really good point. But we have to be very calculated and precise about the changes that we make.
My only rebuttal and qualm with that theory itself is that it requires us to continuously play the game.
What does?
Like Josh said, like why can't we get black people into positions within corporations or whatever, and them not be a mascot. That requires you to play the game at the end of the day. To essentially beat the system, I would think would be to create an equal to where you have Black businesses that are intelligent and educated enough to understand not just business, but understand taxes and power economics, to where they can build themselves up to continuously put other Black people into place, instead of this fallacy or this false idea of a Black person getting to the throne of a predominantly white company and then opening up the escape hatch and then letting all the Black people run in from the side. Like, I have a problem with that, because that still requires you to play the game instead of just creating your own rules. I think that, I'm not going to ignore the fact that in a capitalist society, there's some, prejudice against Black business. But at the end of the day, as we understand, and as we're going to see on July 7th, like, the Black dollar still means a lot. And if your Black dollar is able to accumulate more and more wealth internally, to where you can place people that look like you in that same position, and then you franchise that, and you say, fuck all that white interference, fuck all, the $1 billion corporation coming in and buying and changing stuff up, and you continuously build off of that. Like, stop selling out to get to the throne of the white corporation that was existing back in the early 1900s, when they believed in, segregation, to essentially say, okay, now we made it. Like, fuck Apple. I don't need to see a Black CEO of Apple. I want to see a Black CEO of a Black business built from the ground up. That's what I want to see. Fuck Amazon. I don't want to see a Black, executive at Amazon. I want to see a Black man create something similar to Amazon, to where it rivals it, to where you can put more and more Black people in that predicament. Fuck BET. BET is backed by white people. Put a network that is actually backed by Black people from the very beginning. And then I will, like, that's how I see it. Stop trying to continuously play the game and then getting upset with the result. Like, fuck Starbucks.
It seems like you're talking like, it seems like your plan involves no underprivileged people for this system you're talking about. It seems like everybody could just rise up and become the successful Black business owner you're talking about. But
that's what, no, I didn't say that. That's why I said you need to have Black people who are educated, intelligent, within power, like money, economics, and tax, to stop getting, fucked by the government. Because, I mean, you have a lot of successful businesses. Athletes, at the end of the day, they're a business. But you see how often they get fucked over by taxes, because they are not aware of what comes with money. Like, Black people, that's why I kind of have like I'm here and there with reparations, because I feel like it's too late for that. Like, our culture has moved tremendously within the past 60 years, to where if you give somebody 40,000, they're going to trick that shit off on something. You give somebody 100,000, they're going to trick that shit off of something else. Like, yes, you can give the right Black man that 100,000, and they can, amass, generational wealth with it potentially. But at the same time, we're materialistic. Like, Black culture revolves around material, tangible things. And I was thinking about this last night too. I was like, Black culture is really just an alternative to white culture. Like, we've seen what white people have done. We've taken it, and then we made it, appeal to us a little bit more.
So you saying we're culture appropriating white people?
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying, like, the foundation of it, like, you get a crib, you move out to the suburbs. That's shit we've seen white people do. You have a send, you get some money, you want to send them off to the private school. Like, I mean, it's obvious that, white people appropriated Black music, and they essentially made their remixes and tried to sell them off for more than what they were. But what I'm saying is, like, we've seen what white people do, we mimic it, and we do it better. But we've never actually seen Black culture created from the very beginning. Like say, for example, like how tribes are in Africa. Like, for me, that would be like, that's Black culture.
Yeah, not soul food, which is basically what slave masters used to give to. Yeah, gotcha.
I think a lot of what Desmond was explaining there about the fact of building, like, the Black Apple, the Black Amazon, a lot of that was kind of what we spoke about when Jalen was on the other week, and about taking a template that works, the template for Jewish prosperity. So the article that I found and I shared with you guys afterwards was a large reason of the reason that their community has had this perception of being so successful is that from the beginning they had such a high rate of literacy. So even back in like ancient times, they were so much more literate and they had more skills as opposed to the people around them. So therefore, they were able to bounce back and rebound no matter how hard the times were. Like, not to make light of anything that they experienced or anything like that, but you see other people, other communities, other ethnicities who come to the States and they're able to be successful. And so it's like, well, other people are doing it. It's like we have a template, a ready-made template for success. And so we'd be foolish for us not to adopt that and say, okay, instead of worrying about Apple, like you said, fuck that, make your own. We can do that. We have the ability to do that. And so that's all Desmond was doing, is being an advocate for that.
I understand that, but I feel it won't get as big as you probably want it to be, because if you do have that black business, and of course they're educating other black people would be to rise up and basically do the same thing and become like a black Apple or something like that, that means that these white people will lose some of that power, and I feel they're not comfortable with losing that power, so they're going to do whatever it means to block that. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to let black people get educated. They're not going to, like, we're already pretty educated, but as far as the school system, it's all white superiority. Like, I remember I watched the interview going back to Jane Elliot, where she was talking to her granddaughter, and her granddaughter was talking about how Indians it's in school, and they was learning about how Indians slaughter white people with everything like that. And Jane was like, "Oh, well, why didn't you tell them about like another attack where white people slaughtered the natives and everything like that?" And the granddaughter went back and told the teacher, like, "Why don't we learn about like this?" And he was like, "Oh, can we see you in the hallway for a second?" So they took her in the hallway. Like, yeah, we don't learn about that because it won't make good American. So we don't learn about that. So it feel like they will do anything they can to block that rise to power for black people. You know what I mean?
I mean, but then that raises accountability. So I can't remember the guy's last name, but you've seen his videos. I swear, I'm certain you have. The guy he has dreadlocks, he has facial tattoos, and he's really sharp on a lot of things that he talks about. Ring a bell? I think the first name is Derrick, perhaps. But so we have to take accountability educating ourselves and our families. Like, you can't expect, so with the example, so something that wasn't created for you, you can't expect it to work for you. So why are you expecting that? So we have to do our due diligence and instill that in our own families, our own children, ourselves. Because if we don't, who's going to do it? Nobody's going to take that accountability for us. And so even the things might not be our fault, which we've explained it, and everybody's pretty much aware of that. But it's our responsibility to pull ourselves out, because we can't rely on other people to orchestrate things and put things into place and do that for us. It's going to require us, like, we have to do it ourselves.
I got you. You gonna say something, Des?
Yeah, but I was gonna say my rebuttal to what you saying, like the white power structure would stem any potential black equal, and I would say my counter to that would be like we're evolved as a society technologically to where it's hard to do things like this and it not make headlines. Like, I think the easiest example of this would be Black Wall Street. Like, when that stuff happened, there's not a lot of coverage of that. We don't learn about it. There was nothing to condemn the act back then. If there's any destruction of a black brand that isn't equal, there's countless measures in place now, and there's far more social advocates today than there was in the 1920s, to where things just cannot be swept under the rug.
Can't deny it anymore.
Like, I think before, the white power structure had ignorance in its truth and its true name of not knowing what is happening to their advantage, because as we all know, with every great power structure, who control the printing press controls the mind and the ideology of its society. We're now getting to a point where you have different outlets, you got Facebook, you got Snapchat, you got TikTok, you got
Twitter, YouTube.
Like, there's so many more ways to gain that information. And like I said at the start of it, like, there's definitely a flaw that comes with it, because overconsumption can definitely it can deter a black business from wanting to see. It's like you see, oh damn, every time a successful black business gets brought up, you know, it gets shut down somewhere in some way, shape, or form behind the scenes that we don't know about. Like, yeah, that can deter some shit. I mean, we see right now, you know, Anonymous leaked all that shit about Jeffrey Epstein and the little black book and all the people that, you know, Trump allegedly raped with Jeffrey Epstein and all the other celebrities. Like, we see things like that get leaked with undoubtedly, you know, some truth behind it, but there is never really any repercussions behind it. Whereas if we see like a black person, if any black person was in, if this happened with Obama, they would have had his ass out of office within 48 hours. Mitch McConnell, somebody would have been in that Senate holding shit up to bring this to attention of the masses. But you see what like Donald Trump, like to strengthen your argument, the white power structure is, you know, keen on keeping the status quo. But I'm saying at the same time though, like we have advanced enough as a society to where we have enough tools to use to, I mean, essentially, you know, build up our case on what is happening against us and hopefully getting some form of justice behind it. Like but I will say it is hard to defend my argument against yours because we haven't necessarily seen a full-bred black business grow from start to finish on its own.
Yeah, you was kind of using the justice system. Okay.
You can't say they're not intertwined. Like the justice system and the economic system, there definitely is a lot of similarities between them.
Yeah, they are. But I was just like, that's still not fair for the black men as far as the justice.
Yeah, that's why I said like it does strengthen your argument, and it's like, well, white people can still stem black growth and get away with it. But I mean, I'm saying at the same time, so like we haven't seen that push yet. Like, I mean, we see a bit of the push now, but we'll see, you know, I mean, to your defense, you keep bringing up big business. We've seen Whole Foods take a stand against any political stance as far as like the Black Lives Matter mass. We've seen Taco Bell take a stance against it. Like, I'll agree, like to some extent, it can be a trend to where, you know, next year we're thinking about, oh yeah, this is how it was in 2020 instead of a continuation of like, okay, this was the fight in 2020, that's still the fight in 2021. So it's hard. Like I'm not going to sit here and say like there's a foolproof scenario of a black business getting from, you know, point A to point B with little to no like bumps in the road. But I mean, I think everything starts like Josh says within like Josh and Bryan within like the education system, like literacy. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. Like with my dad's landscaping company, predominantly of our customers is white. Like if there's a market for black landscaping, like we need to know about it. But we see right now that white people are willing to spend top dollar for lawn care, dogs, children, and then their own families. I throw dogs in there to be a little bit facetious because, you know, they be willing to fork over they be willing to fork over money for their dogs. But, you know, I mean, but that goes to show you, like, some black people, they look at dogs as just another creature within the food chain. Like we don't have the emotional attachment to dogs the same way white people do, because when our dog dies, we go buy another one. Whereas, you know, when a white person dogs die, man, like they, nah, bruh.
Well, I know what you mean. Like
They're
more,
like, no, I'm saying like right
maybe
now,
more
like,
severe.
Yeah, like right now, like if your dog dies, it's gonna fuck you up. I'm saying like,
no, I'm emotionally attached to my dog. I'm like a white person.
Yeah.
Like the only difference is he don't sleep in my bed. That's like the only
What'd you just say? What'd you just say?
But
I'm emotionally attached to my dog. I'm like a white person.
No, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
But instead of us just saying like, yeah, I'm emotionally attached to my dog because that's what's right. Like that's makes me feel whole. Not because I've seen, you know, Sue and Karen and Doug take care of their dog this way. Like I'm attached to my dog because I genuinely love this dog.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I would love to see as a society, because people may not see it right now, but this ties perfectly into the time heals all wound arguments, because you will see like when the minority has like a genuine fire in the pit of their stomach to become better than previous generations, you're going to see growth. Instead of falling victim, and this is where the generational curses come into play. Like, instead of thinking like, oh, you know, my dad did it this way, I'm gonna be the same way. Like, when you're consistently enslaving yourself to, you know, the curses of prior generations, who have those curses created because of the negative effects of slavery and segregation and things of that nature, you're consistently playing into a game that is not your own. Like, not at no point should you ever, no matter your situation, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but at no point should you say this is just the way it is, because there's always a better way on the other side. To essentially say this is just the way this is to fall casualty to a system that doesn't really support you.
You mentioned Black people still have they have more tools now, but I still feel like the majority can do something about that, can still counteract those tools. Like, for an example, like, we have cameras now so we can tape it, but they can use certain tactics to either, if it's bad enough, they'll either delete the whole footage, or they'll point out certain things in the footage, like, oh yeah, he tried to reach for his gun at this point, or they'll say something in the actual footage, like, yeah, oh, he tried to reach for his gun or something like that. Because I don't know if you guys know about the case with Kendrick Johnson, the boy that was killed in his high school gymnasium. Like, he was rolled up in a mat,
and his organs were harvested or removed.
Yeah, like, there's like, they messed with the tape. Like, the guy that was supposed to have done it had a father who was an ex-FBI agent, which supposedly he got somebody to go in there and get the tape and mess with the tape and delete footage of the tape. So I feel like he's in his position of power, and he used his tools to counteract our tools, which our tools was that tape to pretty much apply and prove his guilt. But because they have some more power, they was able to go and do that, counteract that. You know what I mean?
I think
we're
talking about two different things.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I get it in the social justice aspect. Like, we've seen countless recordings be doctored or not brought forth in their full value to where you can get the big picture. What I'm saying is, like, I'm saying tools like
education,
like,
okay, I got you.
Bruh, when I was, you know, fifth grade. I don't know why fifth grade equated to 5.
You're surprised that you like that?
Like, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, like, bro, I was like on my laptop just Googling stuff that intrigued me. Like, I had a genuine desire to learn.
Right.
And I mean, I think if, as a Black person, your greatest detriment to yourself is to think that you know everything, or to think that there is no importance of you knowing. Like, being articulate, being literate, it should never be an insult, because there's this image that Black people don't like to read or truly learn about things, to skills per se. Like, not even skills in the sense of blue collar skills, but skills that are going to get you somewhere in life, like building up the routine skills. Say again?
That's actually true among kids, because I remember vividly there was an instance in 6th grade where this girl that I liked, she told her friend that she would not go out with me because I was too smart. Like, so the public perception about us amongst our peers at that young age, like when you see other people, when the kid raises his hand and answers the question, he's using 5 or 6 syllable words and getting the shit right and teaching the teacher stuff. Our instinct as a group is to laugh at them or make fun of them. So, oh, you think you're smart, or you act talking white and stuff like that. Like, there are comments made like that.
And sometimes it's not even a comment. It's the you know, the physical reactions, like somebody smacking their lips, or the huffs and the puffs, like things like that. Like,
that's the culture.
There should never be a. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't care how smart I was. Like, I was willingly able to dumb myself down to fit in. And I say that with a lot of regret now, because I mean, I could have been a lot. I'm not gonna say I could have been, because I was really smart, but I didn't like the education system in itself. I didn't like how things were taught. So my dad is profoundly a rebel. Me, I hated school, but I was never dumb.
Gotcha.
Never dumb.
Anything else you guys want to add?
Yes. Actually, there's a point that both of you have brought back up. So to abstract ourselves away from, I guess the initial answer that Josh gave, but there was a point that both of you made about the delay of healing or the delay of growth. And so Desmond had said something along the effect of you take time to process. So those 2 hours you do it then as opposed to costing you later. I feel like if something takes 2 hours now and you don't do it and then you do it later, you're wasting more time because that's time that originally you were half-assing it and you didn't address it. So and then as uh as you move through life without addressing things properly, you incur more penalties. So with the timeline of something, let's say okay, you're 15 years old. The same habit that you have of being ignorant and not having a skill is not as cute when you're 32. It's not. The penalties as you age, the penalties become more severe for the same things. The lack of responsibility, the lack of financial responsibility, the lack of a job, the lack of education. Everything gets worse with time.
And I think we as a culture need to get away from, the part of, or some form of thought that knowing too much is pointless, because I'll tell you firsthand, like, someone who knows a lot and is able to apply it to a skill that is going to reward them handsomely looks better than the person that knows that skill but can't articulate the entirety of that skill from like point A to point B. Like, say for example, me, easiest way you could say is like forex or any like taxes. Someone who can understand taxes perfectly but cannot articulate their thoughts to explain, pros and cons of decisions is going to look far worse than someone who has the education, has the intellect to articulate their thoughts profoundly and be able to hit the key points while also not knowing, everything as that person that knows everything about taxes but can't articulate their thoughts does.
Well, can you really say
It's,
they know everything about it? Because
I'm not gonna
the
say
ability
know
the
everything.
ability to teach something is fundamental to understanding it. So like the Feynman technique, have you ever heard of that
Nah.
for studying? So he was a mathematician, and so his method of teaching it was you would get a concept, you would try to explain it, and you would write whatever you knew about it. Then you would find the gaps in your knowledge base, and then you would fill those in. You would read that again, then you would fill it back in until you knew it to its entirety. So you were able to teach it as well as understand it. So that is a total understanding. But if you have an understanding of something and you're not able to convey it to other people, to me that indicates that you really don't understand it to the extent that you think you do.
I won't say I agree with it partially, but what I'll say is I work with techs who know our system inside and out like it's the back of their hand, but they don't have the ability to communicate because they don't have the patience to communicate. Like that's specifically what I'm talking about. Like, I know a lot of techs who are too smart for their own good, to where instead of me teaching it to you, I'm just going to do it so you don't have to come back and ask. There's no camaraderie there. There's no communication. There's no dialogue to understand what you could have done wrong and what you could have done to prevent it, instead of me just coming in and or instead of them just coming in and doing everything to, you know, yeah, it's gonna be a lot quicker if I just do it this way, just saying tight. I'll check in with you in 10 minutes. Like, that's specifically what I'm pointing at, because there's a reason why they are the smartest people on the floor, but they're at a job that doesn't necessarily pay them for what their knowledge is worth. Because they can definitely, every single last one of them that are the smartest suck at communication. And I could tell you for a fact that they could go to any of these IT firms and get solid paying jobs, but because they don't have the patience to communicate what is going wrong and how to fix it, it works to their detriment, to their disadvantage. So all I'm saying is, if you take education and take everything that is for and learning, reading, comprehension, and being able to apply what you learn and being able to teach it, that's going to serve you greater justice than just knowing a skill but not knowing how to, you know, convey that information towards beneficial to the next man or woman.
Gotcha.
Because education just isn't 2 + 2 is 4. It's literally breaking things down and understanding why. I think we were more or less just drowned in the homework aspect. Like, oh my God, this is just so repetitive, and you hate it. But I mean, if you actually look at education for what it is, it's the consistent and constant application of what you learn to the point to where you're able to express what you've learned to the next person, which is the test.
I think a lot of what you were just saying about your early experience as a child, which you were just Google things. So much like you, I shared that experience, like things that genuinely interest me, even to this day. I'll find myself getting on a tangent, like I'll think about, or I'll see a picture of a bird or something like that, and then I will research it and figure out like the scientific name for it, is niche in the habitat and things like that. So with that being said, everyone, we have our own unique set of interests. So it's, I think, a large part of getting to what the goal that you're aiming at, what it sounds like what you're aiming at, is to pursue those things. Like you might not be exactly the best person when it comes to math or STEM stuff, but maybe like you're a hell of a mechanic. And so the idea is just to immerse yourself in that, and then get to the point to where you actually understand it and where you know that, because there's a multitude of different types of knowledge trees. And so
Yeah.
with each one of us being different, there's a limitless a variety of ones you can choose from, or ones that suit you.
I agree. I agree.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to add?
No, I really appreciate your insight, Josh. That was very interesting point you made.
Oh, my point about
Yeah.
yeah. You know, you have album of the week, Des? Or you've had
Nah. I'm gonna stray away from the album of the week. I think moving forward, I would prefer for the Black-owned businesses and things of that nature to take that place, because it's definitely something that I want to see grow over time instead of, album of the week. I doubt a lot of people really go back and listen to the album that I recommend or whatever. So I would prefer somebody to, take what Bryan has to offer and get a genuine experience off that and immerse himself in the culture, rather than, giving Apple your $4.99 and the artist your little 7 cents per stream or 17 cents per stream.
I buy my albums, but if you guys want to like that Apple Music life, you do that. But all right. What, you gonna say something, Bryan?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on the album of the week thing. Like, it's been a staple. I understand we might not have one this week, but I do think, like, the idea you said, most people might not go back and listen to the album. That's not the point, because like even what we're doing here is, my idea is, if we can affect one person, or one person finds enjoyment or draws value from what we do, then it's worth it. So I think that, I might listen to the album. So who's to say I don't want to hear the album of the week, Des? You have the people. We want to hear the album of the week.
All right. Well, what we could do is we'll put a poll on the IG, and if people actually vibe with it, if we get more than 5 responses, then 5 will be my goal. If I know I can touch 5 people every week, then I pause. But if I can touch 5 people every week, I think I'll be cool. I'll bring it back.
All right, cool. But if you guys like the discussion, don't forget the like button, and we're gonna see you guys next week. Peace.
Hey guys, thank you for tuning into the discussion. If you guys want to see more content, we also had the Feel the Love series with Bryan Carey as he breaks down the methods of plant growth. Joshua versus the movies, where I go against all your favorite movies, and Joshua versus the music, where I go against all your favorite music videos. So don't forget to check out the content, and I'm going to see you guys in the next discussion.